Good morning, everyone. Just trying to get Instagram to go live as well. Anybody can ever work out why Instagram takes so long. Be more than happy for you to send me a DM and say, this is how to get it to go live. All right, I think we're done. Good morning, everyone. This morning we're talking about chicken feed. Now, for those that don't know, I record a weekly podcast called Not the Farmer's Wife. And if you go to Not the Farmer's Wife on whatever podcasting platform you listen on, you will find in the last 6 weeks, we did a podcast on chicken feed. So I'm only going to touch on it briefly. And I would hope that if you're a podcast listener, you'd go and have a listen to the podcast. You'll get a lot out of that. We discussed chicken feed in quite a bit of detail. Now, chicken feed, the mistake that most people make, there's a couple of mistakes that everybody commonly makes that I want to kind of brush on. I'm just going to move my screen a bit so I'm not looking at other things. All right, so the main thing is that most people don't realize that chickens are actually omnivores, and they're not just slightly omnivore. They are massively omnivore. Chickens eat meat. That surprises a lot of people, but they're actually not just meat eaters, actually hunt for their meat. So our chickens that are out, they're pasture raised, they're in paddock all day, they will hunt field mice. And when I say that to people, a lot of times people freak right out and go, no, but they're chickens, they're birds, they eat seed and grain and things like that. Chickens are not your standard, but you have to remember there are a lot of other birds that also eat meat. Eagles will eat meat. Magpies, we had a magpie as a child. I can remember my mum feeding little rolled up balls of mince to him. There are a lot of birds that eat meat, and they need meat for their body they need it as a protein requirement for their body. And chickens are definitely one of them. They are producing eggs every day. So there's quite a heavy load on their body to produce. So they have to have certain nutritional requirements, and that includes eating protein. Now, I know, so I have seen in the shops in the past eggs, a 12-pack of eggs advertised as vegetarian eggs. And I've looked and gone, okay, do they mean that they're vegetarian because you're not killing an animal to eat it? In which case, sure, they're vegetarian eggs. Do they mean that the chickens are vegetarians? Because if they mean that, the poor chickens, they would be nutritionally deficient if they were not getting some source of meat protein. So our chickens will hunt bugs, they will hunt rodents. Field mice are their favourite, and if one finds a field mice, 25 girls are suddenly running around after one chicken to try and get that mouse back off the one that caught it. But they are omnivores. They need a very wide variety of everything. So for a person who's having backyard chickens, what you need to look at is what do you need to give them nutritionally to make sure that you are covering off on everything that they need. We've already said they've got a heavy nutritional load for producing eggs each day. So layer pellets, despite I know a lot of people would love to be able to make their own feed up, layer pellets are the best source of chicken nutrients. They cover off on everything that they need in their diet. They make sure that they have the right amount of protein in there, which the protein, and I'm going to go off the top of my head here, it's 18% or around that they need in protein. And layer pellets make sure that they are covering off on that. Now, some people don't like using layer pellets, particularly if they say medicated on there. You can find layer pellets that are not medicated, particularly for adult birds. That's not a problem. Chick starter, I've never been able to find crumble for chickens, for day-olds, that is not medicated. And that's because in Australia we have coccidiosis. I never pronounce that correctly, but it's a stomach bug, essentially, that will affect and kill day-old chickens and week-old chickens. So chick starter generally comes with a medication that covers off on that, because once they get to be adult birds, they tend to be able to fight that. It's a bacteria that's in the ground, and when they eat it, it goes into their stomach. As they get older, they can cope with it, but when they're day-olds and week-olds, they can't. So that's why it's in the food for babies. But adult chickens, you can get unmedicated chicken pellets. They're covering off on every nutritional need of the chicken. A lot of people want to feed their chickens scratch mix, and I've discussed it before, but I'll say it again. Scratch mix is chicken candy. If you feed chicken scratch mix, they will not get the nutritional requirements that they need. They will love you to death because it's their favorite food in most cases. Certainly our chickens love scratch mix. We reserve scratch mix for treats, or for if we are trying to get a chicken to go from one place to another and they're not a chicken we can catch. We use scratch mix as a treat to try and get them to follow us. And that is all I would use it for. It really is chicken candy where compared to layer pellets, which are like meat and 3 veg. So if you could imagine it that way, that nutritionally you need to give chickens layer pellets, and as a treat, you can give them scratch mix. Now, as far as all the other things you can feed chickens, and most people like the idea of having chickens because that gives them a source, an outlet to feed out their kitchen scraps. So the chickens can eat kitchen scraps and help as far as breaking down things that would normally go into waste. Now, anything that you can't give to chickens, just remember you can probably compost it. So even if you won't give it to your chickens, composting is an option. That being said, there is nothing that we really don't give to our chickens. I mean, there's a lot of things that we don't eat in our house on a regular basis. So there's a lot of things that we don't have scraps for. And most of that is processed stuff. And I would say try not to feed them processed things. Our chickens do get the tail end of my sourdough loaves, which are processed, but they're when you get with sourdough, it tends to go rock hard after 2 days. So if you haven't eaten it by then, it's rock hard. So the tail end stub of the loaf that nobody wants to eat because it's rock hard, we generally break that up and that goes into the chicken bucket as well. But any vegetable scraps, any fruit scraps, any grain scraps, any leftover food, so rice, pasta, things like that, they can eat that even though it's processed. But things like biscuits, or not that there would be leftover biscuits, I would imagine, if you had them in the house. My kids would probably demolish them. But anything that's highly processed, highly refined sugar, I wouldn't be feeding to the chickens. It would have the same effect as scratch mix in being chicken candy, and it would not be beneficial for them. Now, meat. There is opposing views on meat. So I have had people say to me, oh, you can't feed the chickens meat. And I think, yeah, my chickens eat meat. My chickens, I will put chicken drumsticks into their scrap bucket and they will pick all the gristle and bits of meat left off the bone, and they will actually peck at the bone. I don't know what they get out of it, but they get something out of it. But I've also had people say you can't feed them raw meat or processed meat like hams or bacon or anything like that. Now, not that there would regularly be leftover of any of those things in our house, but raw meat I have fed to chickens without a problem. And the way that I look at it is I try and model what they would eat in the wild. And chickens are domesticated, so they haven't lived in the wild for a very long time. But when I see chickens find a field mouse nest and eat raw meat that they've killed themselves, so long as the meat's not off or got any kind of really weird or funky bacteria or anything like that, in which case it would go straight in the bin anyway. It wouldn't even go to my compost probably. But anything that is still within healthy range, the chickens get cooked meat. They get raw meat if there's any left over. Like I say, there is generally not a lot of that left over in our house. We are big meat consumers here, so it's very rare for anybody to leave meat on their plate. But you can absolutely feed it to chickens. Now, all the books, everything will say, oh, don't feed them raw meat. You have to play it by ear. I would say to you, do your own research. It's a bit like my stance on vaccinating animals. Really, that is such a personal choice. I would never dictate to somebody one way or the other. But what I would say is go and do your own research. And if you come back and think, no, I think my chickens are going to be okay eating meat, you go for it. We've been doing it for years and not had a problem. And the other thing that is a weird way out there thing that I get told I shouldn't feed my chickens is avocado skins, I think it is. I'm sure it's avocado skins. Everybody says, oh, no, they're toxic to chickens. My chickens have never had a problem with them. We eat a lot of avocados here and the skins go into the chook bucket and go out to the chooks and they eat them without a problem. So I think you really do need to do your own research on the whole scrap side of things and what people say you can and can't feed. like I say, highly processed, highly refined sugar, I would probably steer away from, only because I don't think that's good for anything, humans or animals. So feeding it to a chicken is probably not ideal, but definitely as far as any other scraps that you would have in your kitchen, any other food scraps, you can definitely pass them on to the chickens. I know when I refresh my sourdough, sometimes if I left it a bit long and I have mainly bread, because I don't eat bread, so when I've left it a bit long, I have to refresh my sourdough, and I'll have sourdough discard that might be a bit funky, and I'm not going to use it for anything that I would normally use the discard for. And I make up a pancake of discard, chop it up and put it in the chook bucket. Oh my God, they love it. I don't know what it is about sourdough. They just love that kind of, must be something about the yeasty ferment in it. I don't know. Anyway, that's what we feed our chickens, layer pellets. And the brand that we use here in Australia is a brand called Lucky Layer. We found that to be the most reasonably priced per kilo kind of thing. And I'll cover off, I think either tomorrow or the next day, I'm talking about the real cost of chicken keeping. So I'll talk about the price of feed and things like that then. But definitely Lucky Layer has all the nutrients in it. And we found that I have found with customers where they've been feeding a lot of scratch mix, and they come to me and say, what do we feed? We don't feel like we're getting enough eggs. And I get them to switch straight over to layer pellets. And the girls will protest to start with. They will argue and go, I don't want to eat that because I want my scratch mix. I want my chicken candy, like a kid who's been fed, highly refined sugar products, and then you're trying to switch them over to a really healthy diet. They'll kind of balk a bit to start with and reject what you're offering. But eventually, when they get hungry enough, they will eat it. And then you'll find that you start getting really good quality eggs and a lot more of them. So that's what we feed our chickens. I hope you have an awesome Wednesday. I'm going to go, the handy helper's out moving our chickens at the moment. It's their day of the week to go and get moved into their new paddock area. So that's happening. And I've got to go and let some baby goats out to run through the paddock and do baby goat things in the paddock. Anyway, I will see you all tomorrow at the same time, 6 a.m. See you then. Bye for now.